Hi everybody, my name is Caroline and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the oyster overharvesting problem in Chesapeake Bay. This is in response to Sarah's informative speech we heard earlier in the term on the fishing industry. So first I'm going to be giving you a little bit of background information about the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the United States, and its watershed spreads over 6 states and the District of Columbia and is about 64,000 square miles in size. And it is home to over 18 million people and brings in about 500 million pounds of seafood every year. So there has been a pretty steady decline of oysters in the Chesapeake Bay since the 1800s, and this has been caused by 4 different main problems. There's been pollution, there's been disease, there's been a lot of habitat loss, and then the oyster overharvesting, which is what I'm going to get into. So you might be thinking, why are oysters so important? Well, the main reason they're really important is they can filter up to 50 gallons of water every single day, which helps combat the pollution of the water in the Chesapeake Bay. And according to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, in Harris Creek, which is a tributary of the Chesapeake Bay that there's been a lot of restoration work on, the oysters there have taken out 20,000 bags worth of fertilizer, worth of nitrogen from the water in 1 calendar year, which is a pretty impressive feat. So on top of them being amazing water filters, they're also incredibly important to the survival of other organisms that live in the water. They provide a habitat for juvenile blue crabs, and the survival rate of juvenile blue crabs is 3 times greater in areas where there's been restoration work done on oyster reefs than in areas where there are no structured habitats for the blue crabs. And so this is really important because the Chesapeake Bay is a huge producer of crabs. And so when there's low crab populations, there's a really big hit on the economy of the area. And so now that I've laid out why oysters are so important, let me tell you some of the problems that not having oysters in the bay has. Oysters, like I said, are huge water filters, and so when you don't have them there, the water gets really polluted, and especially with agricultural runoff, that creates algae blooms, and these algae blooms lay on the surface of the water and block sunlight from getting in, and it causes dead zones to occur. And a dead zone is where there's so little oxygen in the water that life can't be sustained. And these dead zones lead to the death of animals and a huge problem, the death of plants in the water. In a study that was done, they found that there was a 38% decrease in total area of seagrass in 2019 compared to previous years. And this is just a huge problem because as the bay gets dirtier and more polluted, the economy really suffers. So, some restoration projects. The Chesapeake Bay Foundation is the largest independent conservation organization dedicated specifically to saving the Chesapeake Bay, and it was founded in 1966, and their main goals are to advocate, educate, and restore the Chesapeake Bay and the oyster populations. And the Chesapeake Bay Foundation might be the biggest organization specifically dedicated to the bay, but they definitely are not the only people that are out here doing work on the Chesapeake Bay. The National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration is currently doing a restoration project on 10 of the tributaries that flow into the Chesapeake Bay, and some of those include the Harrison Creek, the Little Choptank, and the Tredevan River. So, now that you have all this information about the Chesapeake Bay, why oysters are so important, and all the problems that declining oyster populations can cause, you might want to, do something to help. Maybe you feel inspired to get out there and do a little bit of restoration work yourself. And so, some really important things that you can do to help, especially if you live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, are buying locally, so you're supporting the local economy, and you're supporting watermen that are sustainably harvesting oysters instead of mass market oyster harvesting. You can also recycle your oyster shells. So oysters are a super popular food, especially in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so after you're done eating them, if you collect all the shells and you take them to your nearest shell recycling site, they will actually take the shells and create new oyster reefs for living oysters to be able to attach to. And it just makes it easier for them to regrow that reef. And then a third way you can help is getting an oyster garden. This is when you get a cage and someone at a restoration site will fill it with oysters for you, and you just hang it off of your boat dock into the water, and it just helps filter out some of those pollutants. And then if you don't live in the Chesapeake Bay and you want to help, spreading awareness is a really big problem. People just aren't aware that it's a thing, and so if you go out and you spread awareness, then that'll be a huge help. And so finally, I just wanted to leave you with some photos that I've personally taken of the Choptank River, which is a tributary of the Chesapeake Bay, and some photos of the bay I've taken. I was lucky enough to get to grow up there, and so these are some of my favorite photos I've taken.